My name is Evelyn. Most people call me Ev. I'm 31, and I live in what's considered a nice, up-and-coming part of Atlanta. But 3 years ago, when I landed the job that changed my life, I truly believed I was invincible, a financial superhero ready to conquer the world and, more importantly, save my family. You see, for my whole life, I was the responsible one. That label, it sounds good on a college application, but it's a heavy cloak to wear when you're just trying to live. My parents, Robert and Martha, own the Hearthside, a cozy but struggling neighborhood bistro. They worked hard, but they were never quite good at the money side of things. My younger sister, Chloe, well, she was the opposite of responsible. She was sunshine, spontaneity, and a whole lot of expensive taste that neither she nor my parents could actually afford. The day I got the call offering me the director of digital marketing role at Phoenix Tech, I remember staring at the salary figure on the screen. It was almost triple what I had been making. At 28, I was suddenly earning serious six figures. I felt like I'd won the lottery, not just for me, but for us. I called home, and they threw a celebration dinner. Dad, we call him Bob, pulled out his famous smoky barbecue ribs, and Mom had baked her legendary apple crumble. The dining room, usually buzzing with my parents' low-level financial stress, was warm and genuinely happy. "We're so incredibly proud of you, Ev," Mom said, cutting a massive slice of crumble for me. She was beaming. All those long nights studying finally paid off. You were always the smartest. Dad raised his beer bottle in a toast. To Evelyn, our successful daughter, you always keep your promises. Even Chloe, usually glued to her phone and only offering a grunt in response, looked up and smiled. "That's actually huge, Ev. Maybe now you can finally stop driving that relic." She was referring to my beloved, ancient Toyota Corolla. It had 180,000 miles on it, a passenger window that wouldn't roll down below 40 degrees, and a scent profile best described as mildewed college textbooks. But it was mine, and it was paid off. I laughed and told them I was already browsing shiny new SUVs. I planned to upgrade in 6 months, pay off my remaining student loans, and start aggressively saving for a down payment on a decent condo. This was my plan. But as soon as the dishes were cleared and the celebration high began to fade, Mom's voice took on that careful, almost theatrical quietness, the one I'd learned to dread since high school. It was the precursor to a family discussion that always ended with me taking on a new burden. "Honey," Mom began, gently stacking the plates, "now that you're doing so well, financially speaking, your father and I were hoping you might be able to help us out with something. Just temporarily." Dad sat down opposite me, looking solemn. He explained how badly the Hearthside had been hit, not just by the pandemic itself, but by the relentless, slow recovery afterward. They had fallen critically behind on the commercial mortgage payments for the restaurant property. "The bank is, well, they're getting serious about late fees, Evelyn," Dad admitted, rubbing his hands together. "Just until we get back on our feet, sweetheart. The last quarter was rough. Maybe 8 months, tops. Just until we can catch up the back payments with the restaurant income." I didn't hesitate. I loved them. They put me through college, even though it meant them taking out loans. They were my parents. Of course, I'd help them through a rough patch. That's what family does, right? You rally when the foundation is shaking. "How much do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and businesslike, hiding the sudden spike of anxiety in my chest. "The mortgage payment," Mom sighed, looking relieved, "is about $2,000 a month. If you could just cover that, temporarily, it would free up the business income to handle those crushing late fees." $2,000. It was a substantial chunk of my new salary, even with the raise, but definitely manageable. I calculated quickly. Pay the parents' mortgage, pay my rent, pay my car insurance, save a little. The new SUV would have to wait, but their home and the family business were more important. I pulled out my phone right there and then, still basking in the glow of the apple crumble and their proud faces, I set up an automatic bank transfer, scheduled for the 1st of every month. Problem solved, I declared, forcing a smile that felt genuine at the time. Family crisis averted. Now, who wants more crumble? We toasted again, this time to the family's resilience, to my responsibility, and to the certainty that in a few months things would be back to normal. That was the last time the word temporary was ever used. In the celebratory warmth of that evening, I had signed up for a burden I couldn't have imagined, a financial tether that would slowly strangle my own future, all for the benefit of people who I was about to discover weren't struggling at all. They were simply choosing a different allocation of funds. And I, Evelyn, the responsible one, had just become the unwilling bank. I had no idea that $2,000 automatic transfer was about to cost me so much more than money. 8 months passed, then 12, then 24. Now 3 years. The word temporary had dissolved entirely from the family vocabulary, replaced by a comfortable, silent expectation. Every month, on the 1st, like a digital heartbeat, $2,000 left my account and landed squarely in my parents' hands. You have to understand the insidious nature of this arrangement. It wasn't a sudden, explicit demand. It was a slow, quiet normalization. When the 8-month mark hit, I tentatively brought up during a Sunday dinner. So, are things back on track at the hearthside? Should I look at dialing back the automatic transfer soon? Mom had immediately cut me off, not unkindly, but with a practiced weariness. Oh, Ev, honey, you know how it is. It's better, yes, but we're just not quite stable yet. We had to replace the walk-in freezer. You know how old that thing was. It was an emergency. Just a little longer, sweetie. You're doing so wonderfully at your job, and we truly appreciate it. Dad would always chime in with praise, never with a concrete plan. You are the rock of this family, Evelyn. We couldn't have held onto the business without you. You're a lifesaver. And just like that, the conversation was redirected from their responsibility to my heroic capability. They made me feel like asking about it was equivalent to denying them life-saving aid. So I shut up and kept the transfer running. After the 2nd year, the mere thought of mentioning it felt rude, an intrusion into their assumed financial struggles, which I was apparently obligated to subsidize. Meanwhile, the hearthside seemed to be thriving. Dad purchased a brand new, gleaming espresso machine that looked straight out of a trendy Brooklyn coffee shop. Mom completely redecorated the dining room, opting for expensive, reclaimed wood tables and velvet banquettes. They'd talk proudly about business being better than ever, customer loyalty soaring, and expanding their catering menu. Yet the $2,000 automatic transfer kept going out every single month. And here's the kicker, the detail that truly crushed me, the one nobody in my family knew. I wasn't just paying their commercial mortgage. I had also finally bought a tiny condo for myself outside the city limits, a fixer-upper, just before the housing market went completely insane. So for the last 18 months, I had been paying 2 mortgage payments, theirs and mine, plus all my normal expenses, plus the occasional emergency request when Dad needed to travel for a conference or Mom's personal sedan needed a $900 transmission repair. Do you know what it's like to earn a 6-figure salary, but live on the net income of someone making barely minimum wage? It's a terrifying, soul-crushing kind of cognitive dissonance. My friends, my coworkers, they saw the title, the company, the office, and assumed I was rolling in it. They'd talk about weekend ski trips to Vail and designer shopping sprees, and I'd sit there calculating whether I could afford to put premium gas in the Corolla, or if I should risk the cheap stuff to afford an extra bag of frozen chicken. The Honda Civic Chloe joked about? It was still my faithful, rattling companion, now well over 200,000 miles. Every time I drove past a dealership, I'd torture myself running the numbers. Could I finally afford a safe, reliable vehicle? The answer was always the same. Maybe, if I stopped paying my parents' mortgage. But that pivotal conversation never materialized because they never gave me an opening. Instead, at every family gathering, I'd listen to updates about the restaurant's success. Best quarter in 10 years. Dad would boast, gesturing expansively with a glass of top-shelf bourbon. We're thinking about expanding the patio next summer. Really go big on outdoor seating. Expanding the patio? With what money, I wondered, since they supposedly couldn't afford the principal business expense. Meanwhile, my condo remained sparsely furnished with threadbare college furniture bought off Craigslist. My peers were building equity and life experiences. I was apparently building their life experience. The worst part was the guilt. It was suffocating. I love my family, I truly do. But watching them plan home and business improvements with money they claimed they didn't have, while I ate instant noodles to stretch my budget, started to feel like a twisted form of emotional manipulation. Whenever I considered confronting them, Mom's voice would echo in my head. We are so grateful to have such a responsible daughter. What kind of selfish monster was I to complain about helping the people who raised me? I was the responsible one after all. So I kept quiet. I kept sending the money. And I kept living like a broke college student, sacrificing my present and my future, all because I believed my successful life was meant to be their financial shield. But that shield was slowly bleeding me dry. The truth I was beginning to suspect was far worse than mere financial struggle, and it was about to be revealed in the most shocking way imaginable. The problem with being perpetually responsible is that your identity becomes inextricably linked to your sacrifice. I didn't just feel guilty about wanting things. I felt guilty about existing outside the role of the family's financial buffer. While my colleagues at Phoenix Tech, young, driven professionals, plan their next trips to Tulum or Aspen, I'd be in the break room calculating the exact monetary value of the leftover catered lunch. I always brought my own lunch, usually a humble PB&J, or on a splurge day, canned soup. But the psychological cost of keeping up appearances was astronomical. They, my coworkers, saw the sharp blazer and the confident demeanor during meetings. They didn't see me after hours scrolling through used car listings for hours, then guiltily closing the browser. I wanted a new car so badly. Something safe, something reliable, something with working climate control. I'd run the numbers on a modest Honda CR-V, a car that cost less than half the annual money I was sending home, and realized the monthly payment would still make my budget unsustainable. The $2,000 transfer always took priority. Then there was Chloe. My younger sister was living her best life, seemingly untouched by the grim realities of financial gravity. She'd graduated college and was working a part-time retail job at a luxury cosmetics store near Buckhead, barely covering gas money. Yet her Instagram feed was a relentless highlight reel of brunch photos at trendy spots, designer sunglasses, concert tickets, and spontaneous weekend jaunts with friends down to the coast. I brought it up to Mom once, trying to sound casual, like a curious older sister, not the family accountant. She seems to be doing really well for a part-time retail gig. How does she afford all that? Mom waved her hand dismissively, the gesture familiar and perfected. Oh, you know Chloe. She's so good at finding deals. Plus, she's young and single. No real responsibilities yet. No real responsibilities. The phrase landed like a physical blow. Unlike me, apparently the one who carried the responsibility of keeping the entire family infrastructure afloat, the daughter who paid 2 mortgages, navigated a demanding career, and still couldn't afford a decent meal out. The resentment became a quiet companion, always humming beneath the surface. My friends were having babies, buying their first houses, and discussing retirement plans. I, Evelyn, the highly successful tech director, was still sleeping on the same worn-out twin mattress I'd hauled out of my college dorm, still surrounded by furniture that smelled faintly of pizza and regret. I was effectively building their retirement, their stability, while putting my own life, my future, my relationships, my security on permanent hold. I started to actively avoid going home. Every visit meant wading through the carefully curated illusion of a successful family business and a comfortable lifestyle that was actually subsidized entirely by my 6-figure salary. Dad would talk about his new fishing boat, a small used one, but still a boat, purchased with cash flow from the catering side. Mom would show off her latest additions to her wardrobe, always insisting they were great finds from outlet malls. But the math never added up. Their combined expenses, even allowing for the restaurant's profitability, could not sustain the level of spending I witnessed while simultaneously having a critical mortgage payment missing from their own budget. The most disturbing part was the way they accepted my sacrifice. Not just accepted it, but expected it. There was never an inquiry into my life, my savings, or my needs. It was always, "You're doing so well, Ev, thank you." My success was simply an endless, replenishing resource to them, not the result of my hard work and sacrifice. I was praised not for who I was, but for what I provided. This psychological burden was slowly eroding the foundation of who I thought I was. Was I a martyr? A fool? A saint? I didn't know. All I knew was that I was trapped, bound by a sense of familial obligation that they were exploiting, and I was too afraid of being labeled selfish to break free. I needed a catalyst, an event so utterly shocking and disrespectful that it would override the suffocating guilt I carried. I was saving up for Christmas gifts, my one annual indulgence, determined to buy them something beautiful, something worthy of my love. I had no idea that this upcoming Christmas, the supposed season of giving, would finally give me the catalyst I desperately needed, a brutal, undeniable clarity about where I stood in my own family's eyes. The emotional dam finally cracked in late August. Atlanta heat is brutal, relentless, and unforgiving. And that summer, the antiquated air conditioning unit in my condo, another legacy of its fixer-upper status, gave up the ghost, died, completely. The repair estimate came back at $1,200, $1,200, a sum I didn't have sitting in my emergency fund because just 2 weeks prior, the $2,000 automatic transfer had gone out, and I had also paid my own mortgage. I spent 3 sweltering days working remotely from my cramped apartment, sweat plastering my blouse to my back, with 3-week fans circulating nothing but hot, humid air. I developed a migraine that felt like someone was tapping a drum inside my skull. Eventually, defeated, I put the repair on my credit card. The cycle of debt and sacrifice tightened its grip. I was sitting on my uncomfortable, peeling faux leather couch, trying to cool down with a bowl of lukewarm soup, a budget dinner, naturally, when Dad posted something on his Facebook page. It was a photo, brightly lit, showing the renovated bar area of the Hearthside. The caption read, "New look for football season." Come check out the massive new 75-inch smart TV we installed. Talk about an upgrade. Thanks to everyone supporting the business." I stared at the image. The TV was enormous, sleek, and clearly expensive. Doing quick mental math, I estimated the TV plus installation was easily $3,500, maybe more. $3,500 for a luxury item. $1,200 for an essential repair item. Currently sitting on my high-interest credit card. $2,000 that I sent them every month to cover their primary business expense. The numbers screamed at me. Something was profoundly, fundamentally wrong. They were prioritizing expensive, non-essential upgrades for their business. Upgrades meant purely to increase customer enjoyment and, presumably, profit over the basic well-being and financial stability of the daughter who was literally keeping the lights on. I gripped my phone, ready to dial Mom, ready to finally, fiercely demand an explanation. But then the fear, the ingrained guilt, rushed back in like a cold tide. "We're so proud of you, Ev. You're the rock of this family. We're so grateful. How could I ruin their joy? How could I, the successful one, complain about a few $1,000s when they were supposedly fighting to keep their dream alive? They hadn't asked me to buy the TV, had they? They were using their own money, the money they had been saving because I was covering the mortgage. It was a subtle, brilliant maneuver, using my money to cover their need, freeing up their income for their wants, and then using their wants to project an image of success that kept the whole lie going. I closed my eyes and the burning guilt won. I couldn't be the one to burst their bubble, to reveal myself as the petty, ungrateful daughter who prioritized her own comfort over their business. I deleted the draft text I'd written and silently promised myself that after Christmas, I would find a way to stop the transfers, gently and firmly. I had been saving up for the holidays. Christmas was my one annual indulgence, my one chance to feel normal and generous. I planned to buy them truly beautiful, high-quality gifts, maybe even something that hinted at the luxury they now seemed to appreciate, even if it meant eating budget meals until March. I needed them to see me, not as a bank statement, but as a loving daughter who deserved respect. I didn't know then that this act of generosity would be the final, fatal miscalculation in my entire financial and emotional life. I was preparing a beautiful gesture of love. They were preparing a brutal, unforgettable lesson in contempt. Christmas Eve arrived with a biting chill in the air, but the house, a charming two-story in a quiet suburban neighborhood of Atlanta, was an explosion of warmth and light. I pulled the Corolla into the driveway, the car's heater struggling valiantly, with the trunk full of carefully chosen gifts. My bank account was hollowed out, but I felt that familiar, annual surge of holiday spirit. I had spent weeks finding the perfect presents, my one true financial splurge each year. A luxurious, expensive cashmere throw for Mom from her favorite boutique, nearly $300, a choice that made my stomach churn, but would make her eyes light up. A beautiful, handcrafted leather messenger bag for Dad, genuine Italian leather, $200, something classic he would use forever. And for Chloe, a complete high-end skincare set from that luxury brand she constantly tagged on her Instagram stories. Another $180 sunk into vanity, but it would ensure her delight. I, meanwhile, had wrapped their meticulously chosen gifts in discounted wrapping paper bought in bulk from a warehouse store, hoping they wouldn't notice the difference. That's what 2 mortgage payments do to your festive budget, I guess. The moment I stepped out of the car, I felt the shift. The house didn't just have lights. It had a professional-grade display. Every window was outlined, the front shrubs were festooned, and a massive, bespoke wreath hung on the front door. It looked like a set from a Hallmark movie, the kind of excess that required a serious line item in a budget. Ev. Mom hugged me tight, wearing a stunning holiday red cocktail dress I'd definitely never seen before. It looked tailored, chic, and probably cost more than my last 5 outfits combined. We are so excited for tomorrow. Chloe has been absolutely vibrating with anticipation. The living room was even more intense. The Christmas tree, easily 10 feet tall, wasn't decorated with the mismatched, sentimental ornaments of our childhood. It was monochromatic, all new coordinated gold and silver baubles, twinkling under perfect studio lighting conditions. Underneath, the presents were arranged in massive, perfectly sculpted clusters, all wrapped in expensive, textured paper with elaborate, designer-quality bows. Everything screamed money, the kind of money they supposedly didn't have for their mortgage payments. "Wow, Mom," I said, genuinely taken aback, forcing my smile wide. "You guys really outdid yourselves this year. It looks incredible." "Well," Dad chimed in, pouring himself a generous tumbler of what looked like a vintage single malt scotch, "it's been a fantastic year for the business, Ev. Truly exceptional. We just wanted to make this Christmas a little extra special. A fantastic year for the business, while I paid their primary overhead." The internal alarm bells were deafening, but I smiled and nodded. I just wanted to get through the night. Then Chloe bounced down the stairs wearing silk designer pajamas, the kind that probably cost more than my monthly gas budget. She was practically vibrating as Mom had promised. "Ev, did you see the garage?" she whispered conspiratorially, her eyes wide. "Dad has been working on something super top secret out there for weeks. He won't let anyone look, but I heard him on the phone yesterday talking to a dealership about final paperwork and delivery dates." A dealership. My stomach plummeted a cold, heavy weight. The dread was immediate and profound. I knew intuitively what this meant. A major purchase. A car. A new car. "You didn't," I said to Dad, trying to keep the horror out of my voice. He just grinned, that satisfied, secretive grin of a man holding a trump card. "Let's just say tomorrow is going to be very exciting for a certain young lady in this family." Chloe squealed, practically clapping herself airborne. I managed a weak laugh and a nod, but inside I was already calculating. If they were buying a car, not a used clunker, but one from a dealership requiring final paperwork, where in God's name was that money coming from? The same parents who needed me to cover their $2,000 monthly debt were now making a 6-figure purchase? Lying in my old childhood bed that night, which hadn't been redecorated since I was 15, I stared at the ceiling. New lights, new ornaments, Mom's new dress, Dad's expensive scotch, and now potentially a brand new car for Chloe, the daughter who had zero financial responsibilities. Either the restaurant was a booming success, and they were actively lying to me to pocket my $2,000 every month, or they had become so complacent with my transfers that they genuinely forgot I was paying their most crucial bill and were using their income, the income intended for the mortgage, to fund this fantasy. Deep down, the denial had finally crumbled. I knew exactly which one it was, and I knew the next morning was going to hurt in a way that mere financial betrayal never could. The stage was set, the red bow was tied, and the curtain was about to rise on the most disrespectful act of my entire life. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of cinnamon rolls and freshly brewed coffee, our sacred family tradition. We gathered around the magnificent tree in our silk pajamas. There's designer, mine a threadbare Target special from 5 years ago. Mom and Dad looked the picture of relaxed, generous parents. Chloe was vibrating, ready to burst. I, however, felt a dull, sixth sense of inevitability. The gift opening ritual began, as always, with Chloe. Her pile was immense, wrapped in expensive, textured paper. Each present brought a shriek of genuine delight: an Apple Watch, designer jewelry, high-end electronics, and a stream of fashionable clothes with the tags from exclusive department stores, items I only window shopped. The contrast between her bounty and my self-imposed poverty was stark, but I swallowed it down. Then Dad stood up, striking a dramatic pose. "Chloe," he announced, dangling a key fob with a shiny BMW logo. "There's one more gift, but it's not under the tree." The sound Chloe made was a primal, ear-splitting scream of pure, unadulterated joy. It was the sound of a fantasy coming true. She flew across the room and launched herself at both parents in a messy, tearful embrace. "Are you serious? Are you actually serious?" she sobbed. We all followed them out to the garage, and there it was, parked under the fluorescent light, gleaming white and perfect, was a brand new, top-of-the-line BMW X5 with an enormous, professionally tied red ribbon stretched across the hood. It wasn't a practical sedan or a gently used model. It was a luxury SUV, still smelling of the dealership. I estimated the cost instantly. $65,000, maybe $70,000 depending on the package. I did the math. $2,000 per month for 36 months is $72,000. They had saved up not to pay off their business mortgage, but to buy Chloe a dream car. The money I sacrificed, the future I put on hold, was sitting right there, wrapped in a giant red bow. "It's from both of us, sweetheart," Mom said, wiping a proud tear as she hugged Chloe. "You've been so wonderful this year, so responsible, so mature. You deserve something nice." Responsible, mature. Chloe, the one who lived at home rent-free, whose biggest financial hurdle was deciding which cocktail to order at brunch. The utter, mind-numbing hypocrisy made my vision swim. I had been paying half their bills for 3 years and was considered responsible, only in the sense that a vault is responsible for holding the money. How much did this cost? I asked, hearing a strange, hollow tone in my own voice. "Don't worry about that, Ev." Dad dismissed me with a wave of his hand, back to the single malt. "That's not important. What's important is seeing our little girl happy." Not important. A car costing more than a year's median salary was not important, but my $2,000 monthly contribution was essential for their survival. The hypocrisy was physically painful. I was the only one who didn't follow them back inside right away. I stood alone in the garage, surrounded by their extravagant joy, and felt something cold settle in my chest, not just anger, but a deep, profound sense of being utterly disregarded. When I finally went back in, my 3 small gifts were waiting under the tree. They were much smaller than Chloe's pile, but wrapped in the same expensive, thick paper. I opened the largest one. Inside was a generic, plastic picture frame still in its original packaging, with a bright yellow clearance sticker on the corner showing it had been marked down from $15 to $4.99. "For your condo, honey," Mom chirped brightly. "We thought you could use something nice to display your photos." Something nice. A $5 clearance frame for the daughter who had paid over $70,000 to keep the roof over their heads. The second package contained a vanilla-scented candle, also clearly from the clearance section, with multiple markdown stickers creating a timeline of its decreasing value. "For ambience," Dad added helpfully. The third gift was the grand finale. I unwrapped it slowly, my heart hammering a thick, slow rhythm against my ribs. Inside was a pair of plain white athletic socks. They had been purchased for less than $4, and the original price tag was still attached. a tiny white flag of utter, absolute thoughtlessness. I held up the cheap socks, the price tag catching the morning light like a spotlight on the final, unforgivable insult. "Be humble," Mom said, that patronizing smile spreading across her face, as if delivering ancient wisdom. "Each one receives what they deserve." The words struck me like a physical slap across the face. Dad chuckled appreciatively. Chloe, clutching her BMW keys, burst into laughter. My own family, laughing at the joke of my pathetic gifts, after 3 years of me sacrificing my life to keep them afloat. In that single moment, something in me, the responsible daughter, the dutiful savior, snapped. It was the sound of a financial tether being severed, a sound only I could hear. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't even drop a dramatic hint. In that moment, holding the $4 socks with the price tag still on, the sheer weight of their calculated disrespect achieved what 3 years of guilt couldn't. It purified my resolve. "Thanks, Mom," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle and dangerous. "These will be perfect." The rest of the day was an agonizing blur of forced enthusiasm and fake Christmas cheer. Chloe couldn't stop talking about the leather seats, the premium sound system, and her plans for a road trip to Miami. Mom and Dad basked in the glow of their supreme generosity, accepting congratulatory calls from relatives all afternoon. "We just wanted to do something special for Chloe," I heard Mom tell Aunt Susan on the phone. "She deserves something nice after working so hard." Working so hard at a part-time job that paid for gas, while I worked 60 hours a week and covered their foundational bills. I excused myself to the kitchen to help with dinner prep, needing to be alone, needing the sterile, familiar order of the stainless steel to ground me. Every time I thought I had contained the seismic rage building inside, I'd hear Chloe's triumphant laughter from the living room, or Dad satisfied, smug voice accepting praise for his parenting. They were enjoying my Christmas at my expense. They weren't struggling, they were saving for a luxury car while I worried about my credit card bill. That night, lying in my old bed, the decision was concrete and cold. I was done. Done being the ATM, done being the responsible scapegoat, done being the family punchline. At 2:17 a.m., the house was silent, wrapped in the deep, heavy sleep of post-holiday exhaustion. I slipped out of bed, the cheap socks still sitting on the nightstand, and moved methodically. I went straight to Dad's home office, a space that was usually locked but in the holiday chaos was left slightly ajar. From my wallet, I pulled out what I had been collecting for 3 years, a meticulous record of every single automatic transfer. I had highlighted each $2,000 withdrawal on the bank statements, a testament to my financial tracking and my deepening resentment. The total was sickening, $72,000. $72,000 lost to my future, sitting right there on paper. I stapled the 3 years of statements together into a thick, intimidating stack. Then I found a pad of paper and a pen. I didn't write a long, emotional letter. I wrote a final statement, clear and brutal, the only language I was certain they would understand. I wrote, "To Robert and Martha. Enclosed are the records of the $2,000 monthly transfers from my account. Total, $72,000. Given your recent ability to afford a $65,000 plus luxury vehicle for Chloe, I assume the financial crisis at the hearthside has been permanently averted. The automatic transfers stop immediately. Effective January 1st. Merry Christmas, Evelyn." I placed the thick stack of highlighted statements and the note squarely on the kitchen counter, right next to their expensive new coffee maker, another purchase that contradicted their narrative of poverty. Then I packed my suitcase. Not dramatically, not tearfully. I packed with a surgical detachment, folding my clothes, taking my few belongings. I even took the ridiculous gifts they had given me, the frame, the candle, the socks. I would get use out of them, if only to spite their thoughtlessness. As I wheeled my suitcase out to the Corolla, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Lightness. It was like shedding a weighted blanket I hadn't even realized I was wearing. The weight of their debt, their expectations, and their profound disrespect lifted instantly. I got into my rattle-trap Corolla, turned the key, and quietly backed out of the driveway, away from the twinkling, extravagant facade of the family home. My phone started buzzing immediately, a late-night text from Mom, probably something saccharine about what a wonderful time she had. I hit the power button and kept driving. The woman who had been trapped, guilt-ridden, and perpetually sacrificing was gone. The woman driving home at 3 a.m. on Christmas night was someone new. Someone who had finally learned the difference between helping family and being used by family. I was heading back to my condo, back to my life, and back to keeping 100% of my paycheck for the first time since I'd landed the job. And honestly, it felt like the best Christmas gift I had ever given myself. The storm was coming, but for the first time I was ready for it. By the time I powered my phone back on late on Christmas afternoon, I had 41 missed calls and dozens of escalating text messages. I hadn't needed to answer to know what they had found on the kitchen counter. The voicemails were masterclass in emotional manipulation. They started with Mom's tearful confusion. "Evie, honey, we found her note, and we're just so confused. What is this about? Please call us back." That quickly morphed into indignant anger. "Evelyn, this is completely uncalled for and frankly embarrassing. We're family, we talk things out." Then genuine, terrified panic. "Please call us back. We need to discuss this like adults. We don't understand why you're doing this to us." Dad's texts were more controlled, more condescending, following his classic pattern of shifting the blame. He acknowledged in a brief sentence that maybe the gift disparity could have been handled better, but spent 3 paragraphs emphasizing that my reaction was disproportionate, concerning, and a severe overreaction to a small misunderstanding. He didn't mention the $72,000. He made my justifiable anger the real problem. But it was Chloe's messages that were truly revelatory, laying bare the sheer entitlement of her bubble. "Evelyn, what the hell is wrong with you? Do you know what you've done to Mom and Dad? Just because you're jealous of my car doesn't mean you can destroy Christmas. This is so incredibly selfish." She followed up with a text that solidified my resolve. "We all know you make great money. Why are you being so stingy about helping family?" Stingy about the life savings I had sacrificed to keep their facade intact. The audacity was breathtaking. I spent the next day, Boxing Day, completely ignoring the constant digital stream, shutting out the chaos they were trying to inflict. For the first time, I felt powerful. I had pulled the plug on their main lifeline, and the subsequent meltdown proved exactly how much they depended on me. My first act of financial freedom was practical, not extravagant. I went to a dealership near my condo. Do you know what it's like to walk into a showroom when you can actually afford what you're looking at? When you're not doing mental gymnastics about mortgages and family obligations. It's intoxicating. I didn't buy a BMW. I bought a reliable, comfortable, mid-size SUV, a safe, practical, all-wheel drive Subaru Forester. It had working air conditioning, doors that actually opened smoothly, and a clean history. I paid a substantial down payment, keeping the loan manageable. It was mine, paid for with money I had earned, and finally kept for myself. The salesman was shaking my hand, congratulating me on the purchase, when my phone rang again. Mom. I watched it go to voicemail. Misunderstanding. That's what they were calling 3 years of calculated exploitation. I let it go. I drove my new car home, windows down despite the chill, music up, feeling more like the successful, capable professional I was supposed to be than I had in years. The pressure campaign intensified. My parents had launched a full public relations effort, painting themselves as the victims of their ungrateful daughter's inexplicable cruelty. Relatives I barely spoke to suddenly called, expressing concern about my mental health and the need to keep the family whole. The narrative they sold was simple. Evelyn has a good job and is being selfish about helping family during a difficult time. They conveniently omitted the new BMW, the $72,000, and the luxury upgrades at the restaurant. A week after Christmas, the digital harassment ceased, replaced by a physical presence. I saw Chloe standing by the entrance of my condo complex, looking smaller and less glamorous than her usual Instagram persona. She had been waiting for over an hour when I finally went down to meet her. She looked tired. "Your phone's been going straight to voicemail," she said, her voice thin. "I blocked your number and Mom and Dad's," I replied flatly. She flinched, the first sign of genuine distress I'd seen from her. "Evelyn, we need to talk. This has gone too far." "Has it?" I asked, leaning against the lobby wall. "Because from where I'm standing, I've just stopped enabling your family's financial irresponsibility. That seems like exactly far enough." I could see the gears turning in her head, the sudden realization that this wasn't just a temper tantrum. It was a confrontation she was utterly unprepared for, and it was about to reveal the chasm of lies between us. Chloe looked genuinely lost in my stark, neutral condo lobby. The expensive handbag, the designer boots, they all looked a little tired, a little less shiny than they did on her Instagram feed. The confrontation was inevitable, and it was time for the truth, without the gentle buffer I had always provided. "Mom and Dad are devastated," Chloe whispered, her eyes red-rimmed. "They can't understand why you're so angry." I almost laughed, but the bitterness caught in my throat. "They can't understand why I'm angry? They bought you a $65,000 car while I've been paying their business mortgage for 3 years. Her face drained of color, going pale under the harsh lobby light. She took a step back, her eyes wide with shock. They told me the car was a graduation gift, something they'd been saving for since I was in high school. "With what money, Chloe?" I demanded, my voice dangerously low. "They've been taking $2,000 from me every month for 36 months. They've taken over $70,000 from my future. Where did they get BMW money if they were financially struggling?" She opened her mouth, closed it, and then the facade finally cracked. She started crying, not the dramatic, attention-seeking tears she usually deployed, but genuine, confused, ugly sobs. I didn't know about the mortgage payments," she whispered, her voice hitching. "I swear I didn't realize you were paying for anything like that." I stared at her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe my parents had maintained the wall of silence around her too, protecting her perfect, entitled existence. Or maybe she had simply never wanted to look too closely at the source of the family's comfort. "But you knew everything else, Chloe," I pressed, the exhaustion of 3 years weighing on every word. "You knew I drove a car that should have been scrapped. You knew I never went on trips. You knew I was always responsible with money. Did you ever, for a single moment, wonder why the successful director of digital marketing was living like a broke college student, while you were jet-setting and shopping?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I thought you were just naturally frugal, that you were just responsible. Responsible. The family code word for the one who sacrificed everything so everyone else could have what they wanted. Your parents spent $70,000 on a luxury car for you while I was eating frozen dinners because I was paying their debt, I articulated slowly, clinically. Does that sound reasonable to you? Does that sound like a family? Chloe sank onto the ugly lobby bench, pulling her knees to her chest. I know it sounds bad when you put it like that, but it's not financial abuse, is it? That's too dramatic. They manipulated me into covering their primary business expense under false pretenses. I countered. They lied about the duration and urgency of the help. They used emotional appeals and guilt to keep me paying while they used their free cash flow to buy luxury items. What would you call it, Chloe? It's the financial equivalent of keeping a chain on one child while cheering the freedom of the other. She was quiet for a long, painful minute, trying to reframe her world. The Princess Tower was crumbling around her. So you're just going to let them lose their house? She asked finally, turning the focus back on my cruelty. I'm not letting them do anything, Chloe. They made a series of choices that led to this. They chose to finance an extravagant car they couldn't afford instead of stabilizing their business. They chose to rely on my income instead of living within their means. They chose to treat me like a bank, not a daughter. She stood up abruptly, her voice breaking. But they're our parents. We can fix this. What if we paid you back? We could sell the car. Could you, Chloe? I challenged, my gaze unwavering. Could you really give up the BMW and go back to taking the bus? Because that's what financial responsibility looks like. Her silence was the only answer I needed. I need you to leave, I said, quietly, the finality absolute. I need you to go figure out your own life, and I need Mom and Dad to face the consequences of their choices without expecting me to rescue them again. She gathered her expensive bag, defeated. At the door, she turned back, her final words dripping with the entitlement I had hoped to shed. When they're living in their car, Evelyn, remember that you chose money over family. The manipulation was transparent, pathetic, and yet deeply effective at stirring the old guilt. But this time it was different. I was stronger. I watched her go, relieved, but knowing the true human cost of this boundary was only just beginning to be counted. The months that followed were transformative for me. Cutting the cord was like stepping into a life I had earned but never experienced. I paid off my credit card debt from the AC repair. I furnished my condo with actual, grown-up furniture that didn't smell like regret, and I started saving in earnest for the first time. I even started dating Michael, a software developer who was funny, uncomplicated, and refreshingly normal. He was the first person I told the whole messy truth to. You did the right thing, he insisted over dinner one evening. They're supposed to want what's best for you, not what's most convenient for them. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. His words helped, but they didn't erase the persistent, nagging guilt that Chloe had successfully planted. When they're living in their car, I tried not to think about it, throwing myself into work. I took on a major project that eventually earned me the promotion my boss had hinted at. My focus, creativity, and energy were soaring, unburdened by the constant financial stress. Then came the inevitable shock. 2 months of total silence passed. I was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning in my sun-drenched living room, a room that now felt peaceful, prosperous, and truly mine, when there was a quiet, insistent knock on the door. Not the loud, demanding bang of a creditor, but a hesitant, almost apologetic tap. Through the peephole, I saw a figure I recognized, but one I had never seen looking so small, so defeated. It was my mother, Martha. She looked utterly drained. Her perfect bob was a little flat, her clothes rumpled, and she clutched a large manila envelope like a lifeline. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 3 months. Every instinct screamed, "Do not open that door. Do not get sucked back in." But the sheer visual proof of her genuine distress overrode my self-preservation. This wasn't the manipulative Queen of Christmas. This was a broken, frightened woman. 5 minutes, Mom, I said, opening the door just wide enough. She walked in and stopped short, taking in the beautiful, serene space, the real art on the walls, the flourishing houseplant, the general sense of peace. "It's beautiful, Evie," she said, her voice thin and ragged. "You've built a beautiful life." She sat carefully on the edge of the sofa, the manila envelope resting in her lap. "We received the final foreclosure notice," she announced without preamble. Despite everything, the anger, the anticipation, the words hit me like a physical blow. "When?" "Last week. We have 30 days to vacate the house." Her voice was flat, devoid of the usual drama. "We couldn't make the payments after the auto transfer stopped. We had financed the BMW, thinking the business could handle the debt, but it couldn't. And we couldn't keep up the mortgage, even with the restaurant's income, because we were too proud to live within our means." "Where are you staying?" "With your Aunt Charlotte, in her guest room. She's made it very clear that it's temporary." Aunt Charlotte, the judgmental one. I could only imagine that atmosphere. "Mom, why are you really here?" I asked, cutting to the chase. I braced myself for the plea for $6,000 to save the house. She opened the envelope, but didn't pull out the foreclosure papers. Instead, she showed me a thick stack of hospital bills. "Your father had a heart attack 3 weeks ago," she whispered. The world tilted. The air left my lungs. "What?" "The stress," the doctor said. "The stress of losing everything, the business, the house, feeling like he'd failed." She handed me the medical papers. "These are the hospital bills. Insurance covered most of it, but the deductible is substantial. Thousands of dollars. This was the real cost, not just financial ruin, but the human toll. My successful, proud father, humbled by a heart attack brought on by the collapse of his own deceit. He's alive," Mom continued, tears finally welling up, genuine tears of fear, not manipulation. "But he can't work right now, and even when he can, the hearthside is gone. We couldn't keep up the rent on the commercial space after the bank started pursuing the property. We lost both the house and the business. Dad was sick. They were essentially homeless, living on someone else's charity. They had lost everything, and now they had medical debt. This was no longer about a luxury car or a clearance sale insult. This was about survival, and my heart, cold and hardened by years of resentment, finally began to thaw. I sat back, staring at the medical bills, the initial rage replaced by a hollow, sickening sadness. This was the consequence. This was what I had demanded, and the universe had delivered it with brutal, life-altering finality. My parents, older adults who should have been planning retirement, were facing destitution and medical crisis. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I'm truly sorry about Dad. I am." "I know you are," she replied, nodding slowly. "But if you're here to ask me to write a check to pay those deductibles or to stop the foreclosure, I can't. I won't." She looked up, and the look in her eyes, the raw, naked desperation, was something I had never seen before. "I'm not here to ask for money, Evie. I'm not." That surprised me. Then why are you here? She took a shaky breath, finally articulating the real reason for her visit. I am here to ask if you'll let us stay on your health insurance. Your job has excellent family coverage, right? Robert needs the cardiologist appointments, the follow-ups, the medication. We can't afford temporary COBRA coverage, and his unemployment insurance is barely covering food. If we could just be on your plan, we could pay you back the difference in premiums, just until Robert is healthy enough to work again. It's essential, Evie. It's literally essential. Health insurance, not money for their lifestyle, not debt forgiveness, but medical necessity. This was a completely different calculus. I studied her face, looking for the telltale flicker of manipulation, the return of the victim persona. But all I saw was fear, a mother's fear for her husband's life. What about Chloe? I asked, wanting to understand the full landscape of their collapse. Chloe found a job, Mom said, and for the first time, a sliver of pride entered her voice. It's at a local coffee chain, not much, but it's full-time. She's renting a room from a friend. She's learning to take care of herself. She said you were right about her needing to grow up. Chloe was working, actually supporting herself. That was a miracle I hadn't dared to hope for. My internal debate was fierce. Adding them to my health plan would cost me approximately $400 a month in additional premiums, significantly less than the $2,000 mortgage, but still a financial entanglement with people who had used and betrayed me. But this wasn't enabling. This was an act of genuine human compassion, a lifeline to keep my father alive and my mother from complete destitution. Yet, I had to protect my hard-won boundary. I need time to think about it, I said. Mom nodded, standing up slowly. She knew she had pushed her luck as far as it would go. I understand. But Evelyn, she paused at the door, her eyes glistening. I know we hurt you. I know we took advantage of your kindness and your generosity. We were wrong about so many things. It wasn't a full apology, but it was an acknowledgement of their failure, a real statement of contrition that was more than I'd ever received before. I spent the next 24 hours agonizing over the decision. Helping them with health insurance was a slippery slope back to the old dynamic, but denying them medical care felt inhumane. My compassion finally won over my resentment, but only under the strictest terms. I called Mom's cell phone the next morning. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with tension. I'll add you to my health insurance, I stated without preamble. But there are conditions, and you will not interrupt me. Anything, Evie. What do you need? First, this is temporary. 6 months maximum. That gives Dad time to recover and find a job with benefits, or for you to find an independent plan. Second, you pay me the difference in premiums, $400, on the first of every month. No exceptions. No sob stories about not having the money. If you can't pay, the coverage stops. Third, and most important, this changes absolutely nothing else between us. Adding you to my insurance is an act of humanitarian compassion, not a resumption of financial support or a rebuilding of our relationship. If you or Dad or Chloe ever uses this generosity to guilt me, manipulate me, or ask for anything more, the coverage stops immediately. No warnings, no second chances. Do you understand? There was a long pause, and then Mom's voice, clear and steady, cut through the silence. We understand, Evelyn. And thank you. This means more than you can ever know. I had established a firm boundary that was about support, not sacrifice. I was providing a safety net, but I was not returning to the role of the infinite resource. The long road to a new, healthier family dynamic had just begun, paved by the wreckage of their past mistakes. The 6-month period I set as the hard limit for the insurance arrangement became a quiet, powerful laboratory for change. Every month, on the 1st, Mom sent me $400. It wasn't the $2,000 I was used to, but the consistency was the miracle. There were no excuses, no pleas, and no missed payments. It was a simple, transactional exchange, and it was respected. For the first time, they were treating me like a service provider whose terms must be met, rather than a daughter whose resources were infinite. Meanwhile, my life continued to flourish. The promotion at work was official, and I was thriving, unburdened by the weight of their financial stability. I continued dating Michael, and our relationship deepened, built on a foundation of mutual honesty and respect, a stark contrast to the deceit that defined my family's past. Then, about 3 months into the arrangement, Chloe called. Her number popped up on my screen. Not a block number or a friend's phone, but her own. "Evelyn, it's Chloe. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "I suppose," I replied, my guard still firmly up. I fully expected a new plea, a new attempt at emotional leverage. "I wanted to thank you for the health insurance thing. Mom told me what you did. It was really selfless. I know it's temporary, and I know you didn't have to." The sincerity in her voice surprised me. She continued, and the transformation in her attitude was palpable. "I also wanted you to know I got a job. A real one. Full-time. They're offering benefits after my 90-day probationary period. It's bookkeeping at a small accounting firm. It's not glamorous, but it's steady income, and I can pay my own rent and utilities. I'm learning what independence actually means." It was genuinely shocking. Chloe, the entitled princess, was becoming financially literate. "Good for you, Chloe," I said, and this time the compliment was completely honest. "I also wanted to apologize," she continued, her voice thick. "A real apology. Not because I want anything from you. I understand now what we did. Living on my own, paying my own bills, realizing how much every dollar costs. It's opened my eyes to what you were dealing with for 3 years. I was spoiled, and I never saw you as a person. I only saw you as the successful sister who could afford it." The humility, the admission of guilt and ignorance, was the final piece of the puzzle. The financial collapse had forced her to grow up, and I realized that my refusal to rescue them had ultimately been the kindest thing I could have done for her. "I'm glad you're learning to take care of yourself," I said. "That's all I ever wanted for you." The conversation ended with her timid request to have coffee sometime, just to see if we could figure out how to be sisters without the toxic financial dynamics. I told her, truthfully, that I'd think about it, but the seed of hope had been planted. 3 months later, the changes in my parents' lives solidified. Dad, having been cleared by his cardiologist, found a job managing someone else's restaurant, not owning, not gambling, but steady, reliable income with a benefits package. Mom got part-time bookkeeping work for a few local small businesses. They moved out of Aunt Charlotte's cramped guest room and into a modest 2-bedroom apartment they could actually afford. They bought used furniture that they owned outright. The family was financially humbled, but personally intact. 6 months to the day after I had added them to my plan, Dad called me himself. His voice was formal, carrying a sober weight that had been absent before the crash. "Evelyn," he said, "I wanted to give you proper notice. We received my new benefits package, and will be switching to my employer's plan at the end of the month. Thank you for carrying us through this difficult time." Carrying us through. Not helping out, but carrying them. The word choice was a startling, refreshing sign of honesty. He acknowledged the truth of their dependency. "You're welcome, Dad. I'm glad things are working out," I replied. He paused a long, pregnant silence. "They are, slowly. And Evelyn, your mother, and I want you to know that we've been talking a lot about what went wrong and what we did wrong. We'd like to take you out to dinner sometime. Not to ask for anything, not to discuss family business, just to spend time with our daughter and hear about your life." It was such a simple request, but coming from him, it felt revolutionary. They wanted me for my own sake. "I'd like that, Dad," I said, surprising myself. "Maybe next month, after everything settles down." The boundary was held, but the door was finally cautiously opened. The rebuilding was complete. A month later, we met for dinner at a local Italian place near their new apartment. It was a comfortable neighborhood spot. Good food, reasonable prices, nothing extravagant. A far cry from the expensive, pretentious steakhouses they used to frequent when they were living beyond their means. They looked different, older. Certainly, the strain of the last 6 months was visible in the lines around their eyes, but they also looked lighter, more real. Mom's outfit was stylish, but clearly practical, not designer. Dad seemed genuinely relaxed, the frantic, desperate energy of a man trying to keep a sinking ship afloat finally gone. "You look good, Ev," Mom said as we settled into the booth. "Happy." "I am happy," I admitted, smiling genuinely. "Tell me about the new job, Dad. How's the managing life?" And so I told them about my promotion, the challenging new projects, the team I was building. They listened, really listened, without immediately calculating how my success could benefit them. There were no veiled suggestions about investments, no comments about how I should spend my money. They were interested in me. They, in turn, told me about their new life, their small apartment, the shared gardening plots they'd taken up, the budget they'd created, the first truly sustainable budget of their adult lives. Dad talked about the relief of not being an owner anymore. It was vanity, Evelyn. Pure vanity. We were too proud to downsize the business, too stubborn to admit we were in over our heads. It took losing everything to realize we'd been building our lives on a foundation of borrowed money and borrowed time. The stress nearly killed me. Now, knowing our bills are covered, knowing we aren't gambling on future income to pay current expenses, I sleep better now than I did when we owned the big house. It was the admission I had waited 3 years to hear. They understood. They accepted responsibility. Chloe joined us for dessert, having just finished a late shift. She looked tired, but also more confident than I'd ever seen her. She was wearing simple, smart work clothes and carried herself with an air of self-reliance. "I made lasagna from scratch last week," she announced proudly. "Actual cooking. Who would have thought?" "How very domestic of you," I teased with a small, affectionate smile that felt nothing like the strained smiles of the past. "I know, right?" Chloe grinned. "Turns out being responsible is actually kind of satisfying. I never knew because I'd never tried it." After dinner, as we walked toward our separate cars, my reliable Subaru, their modest, paid-for sedan, Mom pulled me aside. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. "I need to say something that should have been said months ago." She looked me straight in the eye. "I'm sorry. Not sorry that we got caught, or sorry that there were consequences. I'm sorry for what we did to you. Sorry for using you, for taking advantage of your good heart, for treating you like a bank account instead of our daughter." It was the complete, unqualified, and sincere apology I had needed for years. "Thank you for saying that, Mom," I replied, my voice thick. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I hope someday we can build something new, something healthier. We will, Dad chimed in, putting his arm around Mom's shoulder. We know now that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. A few weeks later, Chloe and I finally had that coffee. We talked about books, movies, her new life, my relationship with Michael, normal sister stuff without the toxicity. Do you ever regret it? She asked as we finished. Walking away that morning, forcing us all to face reality. I thought about it seriously. No, I regret that it took so long. I regret that it had to get so bad before I found my backbone. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I'm glad you did, Chloe said quietly. We all needed to learn how to stand on our own feet. We just didn't know it at the time. Driving home, I realized that the angry, resentful woman who packed her bags at 2:17 a.m. on Christmas morning was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, and more confident in her own value. I had built a life I was proud of, defined by healthy boundaries, mutual respect, and genuine connection. My parents and my sister had learned financial humility and independence. That Christmas morning, I had thought I was losing my family. But by drawing a boundary, by refusing to enable their dysfunction, I had actually saved us all. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for the people you care about is refuse to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. For anyone watching this, especially those carrying the burden of being the responsible one for family, love does not require sacrifice, and family does not mean accepting mistreatment. Your financial health is part of your self-respect. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is essential. Sometimes, allowing people to face the natural consequences of their choices is the only path to true growth and a healthy, sustainable relationship. Have you ever had to choose between your own well-being and a toxic family dynamic? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you for watching.